Welcome to segment 3 of our Community Readiness Assessment training series. I'm Matt Corser from the Strengthening and Sustaining Ohio Suicide Prevention Coalition's initiative. In segment 3, we will provide an overview of key components of the Community Readiness Model. We will provide in-depth guidance on conducting a community readiness assessment, and we'll focus especially on tools and resources that can guide your coalition in planning to conduct a community readiness assessment. Because this is an asynchronous training series, on the webpage you're going to find the video. You're going to find supporting materials, including the slide deck that accompanies this video. You'll find the Triethnic Community Readiness Model Manual, and you'll find other tools that are going to help with planning. Let's start, however, with some acronyms. CRA is a Community Readiness Assessment, and that's the overall process of gathering community data to understand readiness. TEM, that's the Triethnic Model, and that's the model we're going to use to conduct our community readiness assessments. CRM, that's the Community Readiness Model. That's the exact same thing as the TEM. The Triethnic Community Readiness Model is a systematic method for assessing the level of readiness of a community. As we talked about in previous segments, the model measures readiness on 5 dimensions. It's going to include 9 stages of readiness. It is going to help you identify strengths and weaknesses in your community related to readiness. And it's going to work within your community culture and capacity. Readiness in the Community Readiness Model has 5 dimensions. Community knowledge of the issue, number 1. Number 2, community knowledge of efforts around the issue. Number 3, community climate. Number 4, leadership. Number 5, resources. It's important to know that each of these dimensions can be at different levels of readiness. And if you understand readiness for each dimension and the level that is at, that will guide your efforts to build readiness in your community to address suicide using the CDC strategies. The Community Readiness Model is going to include 9 stages of readiness for each of those dimensions. The first is no awareness. The second is denial and resistance. The third is vague awareness. The fourth is pre-planning. The 5th is preparation. Number 6 is initiation. Number 7 is stabilization. Number 8 is expansion, or what they call confirmation in the manual. And number 9 is community ownership. Stage 1 obviously is the lowest level of readiness. Stage 9 is the highest. If we start breaking down these stages of community readiness, if a community has no awareness of an issue, it's just the way things are. It's the way they've always been. Oftentimes, we may also see communities in a state of denial. Well, it's not my problem. Or, well, maybe it is a problem, but there's absolutely nothing we can do anything about related to it. The third stage is vague awareness. Well, we know there's a problem, but, we're not sure who should address it, and maybe somebody will do something. Pre-planning is we know it's a problem, and we know something should be done. We know we probably should do it, but what is it that we should do? As we move into preparation, that's where planning, but we really do need more information and resources. Initiation, this is in one sense the most fun part of the work we do in our communities. We're working on it. We're in motion. We have enthusiasm. Stabilization, that means not only are we in motion, but we've established those activities. They're starting to move forward as the normal course of business. But the thing is, we really haven't done much in terms of evaluation, so we're not quite sure what the impact is. But we do know that our activities have a foothold in the community. Expansion. Activities around the issue have been evaluated and modified. We've got database planning, and we're ready to, based on what we found with our evaluation and our data-informed planning, we can expand the scope of what we're doing and build on the tools we have to better address the issue. And really, the highest level of readiness is community ownership. We have a comprehensive plan in place. Evaluation is routine. It's done normally as part of this effort. And we've got a high level of community involvement and a high level of buy-in and a high level of resources and support. Let's next, now that we know a little bit more about the 5 dimensions of community readiness and the 9 levels of community readiness for each of those dimensions, let's circle back to what we talked about in previous segments about the basic steps we need to engage in for conducting a community readiness assessment. Number 1, we have to select or define the community for our community readiness assessment. Number 2, we have to identify a problem of practice. And for this initiative, our shared problem of practice is readiness to engage in a comprehensive approach to suicide prevention using those CDC strategies. Number 3 is we have to plan to conduct our community readiness assessment. And that's going to involve forming a CRA team. We'll talk about that in another segment. Obtaining supplies, preparing the interview script and the introductory script, and identifying and engaging 5 to 8 key informants from various community sectors. And there'll be a separate segment on that as well. We're going to conduct our interviews and record them. We'll transcribe our interviews. We will score and analyze the data. We'll report the data out to our coalition and to our communities. And we'll share the data. And from there, we're going to develop a plan to build readiness around the issue of suicide and addressing it with a comprehensive approach that includes the CDC strategies. So let's talk for a minute about selecting or defining the community for the community readiness assessment. The question to ask is, who is the priority community for your community readiness assessment? You could define it geographically. It could be your county. It could be the service area of your coalition. It could be a smaller area in your county or your service area, maybe a city, maybe a part of the community that hasn't really seen much in terms of programming. It's less important what that definition is of community than it is that you've thought intentionally about how you want to focus your community readiness assessment related to community. Once you've defined the community, you then have to make sure that you have a basic understanding of it. Yeah, and that can include demographic information. It can include health trends. It can include interesting facts. It can include the relationships that you and your coalition have within that community, however you've defined it. Next, when you are conducting a community readiness assessment, the next step is really to identify the problem of practice. And all that is the issue, concern, health threat, or wicked problem that you're going to address through the community readiness assessment process. And as we've talked about, for this initiative, our shared problem of practice is readiness to engage in a comprehensive approach to suicide prevention using the CDC strategies. We need to engage in planning to make sure that our community readiness assessment is successful. And there are some key planning steps that need to be completed before jumping into interviewing. The first is you'll need to form a CRA team. And we'll talk about this in detail in segment 4. You'll need to obtain supplies and technology. Primarily, this is going to be that you need to make sure that you have Zoom so that you can conduct your community readiness interviews, and that you have a transcription option, and we'll talk about that as well. You'll prepare the interview and introductory script, and you'll identify 5 to 8 key informants from various sectors of your community. We're going to talk in detail about that in segment 5 of our training. But what's important for you to know now is that the informants you're looking for are people who have big ears, who know the community. They may not be the loudest voice. You want people that are a cross-section of your community, not just your coalition members. What you really want to do is gain a broad understanding of your community's readiness to engage in suicide prevention in a comprehensive way using the CDC strategies. Accompanying this training video is a community readiness assessment planning tool. This is a way to stay organized. It's going to help you formalize your project management infrastructure. It's going to help you track progress and make sure nothing is overlooked. It's going to help you see next steps and your timeline. And this tool is located on the website along with all the materials for this training segment. The thing to say here is that you don't have to use this planning tool. If you have a different tool that works better for you or your coalition, by all means, please use it. But if you need a planning tool, this one will help you make sure that you are ready to start your interviews and to work through the entire community readiness assessment process. Let's talk about materials and resources needed for your community readiness assessment. Accompanying this video, you'll find the detailed list of resources that you're going to need to complete the process. That's going to include the CRA team, and it'll focus on roles that you have to fill: interviewers, scorers, and a report writer. Additional segments in this training series are going to focus specifically on that CRA team. We'll talk about supplies that you need to purchase. There's really not much. You'll need a subscription to Zoom, and that is an allowable expense under your grant. You'll need a package of 5 highlighters. It really is very manageable. It's one of the reasons that this model really does fit a wide variety of communities. You also will need to purchase a transcriptions subscription or a transcription service. And the resource list gives you a variety of different options. One of the best and lowest cost options we've found is something called Otter.ai. That's an artificial intelligence-based transcription service, and it interfaces directly with Zoom. So, we will talk more about that in another section as well, but be thinking about that as you engage in your planning process. You will want to prepare the interview and the interview script. That's a key component of getting ready. The interview introduction is really the brief introduction that you'll read to respondents to explain the interview and the CRA process. And this is going to happen after you have identified your key informants. And what we should say as well is that there will be another section of this training. It's going to focus really on who those key informants should be and how to engage them. It may well be that this interview introduction is where parts of your coalition's origin story fit, where before you begin the interview, you can spend a bit of time and help your respondent, your key informant, understand how the community readiness assessment process fits with the established work of your coalition. Conducting a community readiness interview is going to require an interview script, and you'll customize this script using your community's name. We've already incorporated the problem of practice, readiness to engage, in a comprehensive approach to addressing suicide using the CDC strategies. This is about 40 questions, and it's got a brief demographic profile as well. It does take, depending on how much your respondent talks, up to an hour to get through, or potentially even a little bit more. So what comes after planning has been completed? After you've completed your planning process for the assessment, you're going to be ready to start scheduling and conducting interviews, and making sure, of course, that you're recording them, because you'll need that transcript for scoring. You'll have those recordings transcribed. You'll score and analyze the data. In additional segments, we'll talk about how to do that. You'll work with the leadership team of this initiative to report the data. And then you'll have an opportunity to share your results with your coalition and with the community at large. And we will begin work to develop a plan to build readiness in your community to address suicide prevention in a comprehensive way using those CDC strategies. This may seem like a lot, but it's really important that you know that each of these next steps has videos and supporting materials that will guide you and your coalition through the process. Let's talk about resources on the web page. We started this segment focusing on this. We've covered a lot of ground. You'll have this video. It can be viewed any number of times, as many times and by as many coalition members as is helpful. You'll have supporting materials, and that does include the Community Readiness Assessment Model Manual. We've also created a large number of tools, including the planning tool we reviewed, a list of the resources that you'll need, and your options, the introduction to your interview, the Community Readiness Assessment interview script. In another segment of this training, we'll focus on how you interview using that script. And we've created a set of frequently asked questions to guide you and your coalition through the process of planning and to help ensure that you have readily available answers to common questions about the process. Pulling this segment together, we focused on a more detailed overview of the triethnic model for community readiness, and we focused extensively on providing tools and resources that you're going to need to both plan for and conduct your community readiness assessment. In the next segment, we're going to focus on forming your community readiness assessment team.